So, I've been living with the M4 MacBook Air for about 2 weeks now, and I only have one question. Who the hell needs a MacBook Pro? So in this video, I'm going to go over the specs and different configurations of the M4 MacBook Air to see which one you should buy and if it really is an overall better deal than the Pro. Let's talk about it. So, in case you've been living under a rock, the M4 MacBook Air came out about 2 weeks ago, and aside from being the spec bump we were expecting it to be, it also dropped the starting price for the base configuration down to $999, which Apple achieved by cutting costs in other places, such as only buying a single bucket of blue paint to cover all the millions of MacBooks made in their new sky blue color.
Where's the blue?
Where's the what?
The blue color.
I don't know. To my eye, it's kind of blue.
Yeah, a little.
But the big question is, as always, who is this laptop for? And honestly, I think it might just be for practically everyone, including a lot of people who would have previously fallen into the camp of needing a MacBook Pro. So, in this video, I'm going to be looking at the display, the performance, the battery life, the different upgrades, and the pricing structure, and finally, whether or not you should buy it or get a MacBook Pro instead. There are timestamps in the description. Let's get into it. The M4 MacBook Air comes in two versions, a 13-inch display, which is actually 13.6 inches, and a 15-inch display, which is actually 15.3 inches. So you actually get a little bit more than what the name suggests, which is, as my favorite politician would say, a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. I'm only on episode 2 so far, but I've got a good feeling about this guy. Now, given that the actual size difference between the two is even less than 2 inches, you might think it's not all that noticeable. But in fact, the difference between them is a staggering 26%. Meaning you get effectively an extra quarter of a screen when buying the bigger version. And trust me, you will absolutely feel those 2 inches.
Phrasing?
Now, whether that's worth an extra $200 is ultimately up to you. But moving on, what is the display actually like? Well, you can read the specs on the screen right now if you like, but I prefer to describe what those numbers actually translate to in real life. First of all, it is a very beautiful looking display, which is both sharp and colorful. It's plenty bright for most use cases, although if you do use it in direct sunlight, it might struggle a bit with darker scenes. It also comes with True Tone technology, which can automatically adjust the warmth of the image to match your surroundings, but I've actually turned it off as I prefer how it looks without it. It's super portable, even in the 15-inch version, and it never feels cumbersome in any way to carry around or work with while sitting on the couch. And because it has no fans, it is completely silent, which I absolutely love. Now, you might worry how it not having fans impacts performance, but I did a whole test on whether or not this machine could be used for video editing. You can find that video right here on my channel. And I found that it is an absolute beast in that regard, and easily capable of handling my full workload without it ever throttling. That's not to say it won't heat up a little, and certain tasks definitely do cause it to warm up quite a bit, but it does have to be pushed quite a lot before it ever gets to that point. I've been able to edit entire videos in 4K 60, meaning pretty massive files, for hours on end, and it didn't so much as stutter or raise the temperature at all. That being said, if you plan on doing any intensive high-end gaming on this thing, I'd probably avoid the M4 Air. But honestly, given the lineup of games available for macOS, I don't see why you'd go for the M4 Pro either, although it probably would be able to run everything smoothly. As far as the M4 Air goes, I have been able to run Baldur's Gate 3 on medium settings and play it for a couple of hours without it slowing down, but it did get pretty warm when doing that. In terms of speakers, well, here's a test of how they sound. If you're using Final Cut Pro, you could probably expect to see slightly better results, and if you're using Adobe Premiere, don't. And I started to write a bit, just to dull the pain. And though I'm liking it, it's not a call to fame. Every time I flow, it's like I found a way to calm the rage. Until I'm stepping out the roof and realize it's all the same. I had to hustle and flow, but only one gave me dough. So I would struggle with both until I lost one. Other than that, I also really enjoyed the typing experience on this thing. I honestly was afraid that now that I've bought my first mechanical keyboard, I'd find it hard to go from a real chunky keyboard to one on a laptop, and especially one that's about as thin as my patience when I'm out in traffic. But honestly, this thing feels really nice. The keys are responsive and do have a decent amount of travel, and I also love how everything is spaced out, at least on this 15-inch version. And the trackpad on here, absolutely brilliant. First of all, again, on the 15-inch version, this thing is massive.
And you know what else is massive?
But for me, it's the functionality of it that gets me. Everything is just super smooth and intuitive on it, and the option to customize it so that different gestures enable you to do different things, such as go to the desktop, grab items, or pretty much anything else you could think of, is just mwah. And finally, as far as battery life goes, Apple claims the M4 Air can get up to 18 hours of light use on a single charge, and that's honestly pretty much in line with what I've experienced so far. If I'm just browsing the web or writing, then I can literally go hours without seeing the battery dip all that much, and I can sometimes go several days without needing to charge it, which is just absolutely crazy. It also has a really good standby mode, meaning even when you just put it to sleep instead of turning it off, it barely loses any battery. Of course, if you do heavier stuff like gaming or video editing, for example, it will run out a lot faster, but it'll still get you a good amount of hours before you need to plug it in. And speaking of plugs, before we move on, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk about the sponsor of today's video, keysfan.com. KeysFan is a site which sells digital keys to all kinds of software, and right now they're holding a massive sale on lifetime keys for Windows 10 and 11, as well as Microsoft Office packs for both PC and Mac. There's also several bundle deals, and you can use code ATS50 at checkout to get 50% off any Windows key, or code ATS62 to get 62% off any Microsoft Office pack. KeysFan has a 4.8 rating on Trustpilot, meaning they are incredibly reliable, and they also have a bunch of other stuff on their site, including games. So use the link in the description and get a great deal using one of my 2 coupon codes, which also helps to support the channel. And thanks again to KeysFan for sponsoring this portion of the video. So if you made it this far and decided that you want to buy an M4 MacBook Air, great. Congratulations. But then the question becomes, which version should you get? And frankly, that's a topic that's big enough to be a video all on its own, but I'm gonna try to break it down for you really quickly here. So the MacBook Air starts at $999 for the 13-inch version with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage. That version only has an 8-core GPU, which you can upgrade to a 10-core GPU for just $100, which you absolutely should not do. Because for just $100 more than that, you'd also be able to get an extra 256 gigabytes of storage. And as you can see, you're able to upgrade either the storage or memory however you want, along with the screen size. But because Apple makes their machine parts out of unobtainium, those upgrades can quickly end up costing you an arm, a leg, a kidney, and your firstborn child. So here's my very basic advice for you. If you just want a small portable laptop that you can use for everyday stuff like schoolwork, web browsing, watching your favorite small content creator on YouTube, and so on, get the base model. It's a great deal and really is worth the price, especially if you can get it with a student discount. Now, if you're looking to do anything that might take a bit of space on there, such as make music, edit videos or photos, or play some smaller games, then my recommendation is to go up to 512 gigabytes of storage, which is really going to be the sweet spot for a lot of people, I think. Anything beyond that, like 1 or 2 terabytes, I would recommend you just get an external SSD instead, which is going to be way more affordable and potentially just as fast. Now, it might seem a bit odd for me to be saying this since I got the 1 terabyte storage option, but I do have an extremely specific use case where I plan to do some music production, where I have some really large sound libraries I'd like to be able to always have access to, while also wanting to use this as my main video editing computer and occasionally playing a game or two on here. But unless you know you need it for something extremely particular like this, stick to 512. So what about RAM? Well, this one is a bit tricky. I've got the 16GB RAM configuration and I'm able to edit full-scale 4K 60 videos on this thing without it throttling and without my laptop having used even a single byte of memory swap so far. So on the one hand, I'm tempted to say it's a waste to upgrade your RAM at all. But on the other hand, if you're doing something even more intensive than the stuff I do, or perhaps you like to multitask and work on several things at once, then upgrading your RAM might just be worth it after all. So if you have a good argument for why you might need it, then sure, go ahead. But for most people, I think 16GB of RAM is going to be more than enough. And finally, there's the choice of screen size. And well, if you want a bigger screen, then get the bigger screen. Personally, me wanting a bigger display was one of the primary reasons I even went with the MacBook Air to begin with, and I can tell you that I absolutely love the mixture of size and portability that you get from this thing. Honestly, the fact that you can get access to a screen this size on a brand new MacBook at less than half the starting cost of the 16-inch MacBook Pro is one of the main selling points in my opinion, but again, it's all going to come down to what you want. Speaking of the MacBook Pro, I wanted to quickly touch on that because I truly do think now more than ever that the MacBook Air really is more than enough for the vast majority of people. And by that, I mean even people who might have previously thought they needed a Pro. I make videos on YouTube, and sure, they're not exactly high-grade cinema, sorry Martin Scorsese, but I'm still doing something that's at least comparable to what most video editors would do with their machines. And I'm purposefully choosing to do it without even using proxies or rendering out sections while I'm editing, which would make everything run smoother, and this thing still hasn't so much as stuttered even once. So again, the only reason you'd need a Pro is if your workflow was a lot heavier than what most other people use, even in your niche. Of course, if that is the case, you should absolutely get a Pro. And there are other reasons why you might want one, even if you don't technically need it. Maybe you value having a brighter and higher quality screen. Maybe you want something with better speakers or more ports, or maybe you want to strap one to each of your hands and feet and spin up the fans to see if you can fly like Iron Man. If that's the case, then by all means, go ahead and splurge on the machine, which is, of course, technically better. But for 99.999% of people out there, I'd say the M4 MacBook Air is more than worth it. Alright, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, please leave a like as it does help out the channel, and subscribe to see more unbiased reviews from someone who hasn't been tainted by years of buying expensive desk mats from GroveMade. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.